What's up, Active Club? My name is Kevin, and I'm here to take you through a 20-minute yoga fundamentals. So whether you've done yoga several times or this is your first time, there's bits and pieces that you can take away to help support you in your movement journey. So starting things off, why don't we shift ourselves into a tabletop position. One of the most common movements in a yoga class is spinal movement. So cat-cows are typically something that we do in every class. As you find your fingertips down, separate the fingertips nice and wide. This gives you an opportunity to really feel into the strength and control of your hands and also taking a little bit more of that weight and load off your wrists. As you feel into the pressure down through your hands, push the ground away from you. And then feel your knees nice and stacked underneath the hips. Toes can be tucked underneath or tops of the feet can be down. I find that toes tucked underneath is a little bit more comfortable for my body personally. As you find your next inhale breath, think of lifting through your tailbone as if your tailbone had a string attached, pulling up towards the ceiling. Let the base of your ribs start to flare as you inhale, and then adding a little lift of your gaze. So you're adding a little push down through the ground as you feel into that reach of your chin. Then with an exhale, see if you can segment the body. That tuck of the tailbone starts to come in as you round and curve through your lower back, through your lumbar spine. Hug the base of the ribs up and towards the ceiling, chin drawing in towards your chest. So we're getting that nice movement and range through our entire spinal column. As we inhale, feel the base of the ribs begin to drop, tailbone begins to lift, gaze begins to shift, and then exhale, tailbone tucks, hollow the core, round it out. Take a few more here. Inhale and exhale. I often find that rather than focusing on your glutes controlling the movement, if you were to think of your ribs controlling the movement here, this takes the movement out of your mobilizers, your big muscle groupings, and works your stabilizers, your smaller muscle groupings. So as you're finding that movement, think of leading with your rib cage and moving with your rib cage. Another thing to focus on, go ahead and bring yourself to a kneeling stance, is where you're drawing your breath into. Most of the time throughout our day, our breath is locked up in the top registry of our body, so we're feeling a lot of our breath being shallow. See if you can shift your breath down into your belly. Breathe into your belly here. Let your belly expand. Feel your belly compress. So feeling that expansion and compression. Fortunately, we don't have to think about our breathing all throughout the day. Our body just naturally takes care of it. But when we have those moments of intentional breathing, it can shift and change a lot of the ways that our body receives the movement in a yoga practice and just receiving the breath in general. Good. Did you notice any differences? Feel free to let me know. Bringing yourself back to that tabletop. You're gonna rock your knees side to side. Toes are tucking underneath your feet, shifting to another common pose, which is downward dog. As you start to lift the hips, lengthen through your legs here. Now we have that misconception that the heels need to be flat in a downward dog. They absolutely do not. You can keep this lifted in the toes. You can take as much of a bend in your knees to then think of the tailbone lifting nice and high. This does work a lot of the stabilizers through the arms, through the legs, but the intention behind a down dog is to feel into that full length of your spine here. So see where you can soften through your neck, maybe nod the head up and down, little shift of the gaze side to side. Adding a deeper bend through your knees softens that load through the back, gives you more of that opportunity to lift and lengthen through the tailbone. Now, if you ever feel that your shoulders are getting fatigued, tired, or wrists are feeling the same way, you can turn your fingertips at a left and right angle, letting your body create scaption, that nice anatomical structure through your shoulders. You get a little more support here, a little more control. So as you feel into that lift of your hips, take a nice inhale breath. See if you can lift those hips a little bit higher, maybe lengthening through your legs. And then exhale, add a deep bend through your knees, gaze past your fingertips, and then inhale, slowly walking this up towards the top of your mat. As you feel into your feet planting, take a halfway lift here. Now, rather than lifting through your gaze, keep the neck back. Keep the back side of your neck nice and long. Little add of pressure through your hands to plug the shoulders down and in. Add that little bend through your knees again to then feel your sit bones reaching back behind you. Now notice how the weight is distributed through your feet. Sometimes we can lean to the outer knife edges or to the inner knife edges. See if you can feel the three parts of your foot here: the inner, the outer, and your heel. Rock back into your heels. Rock forward into your toes. Back into your heels. And forward into your toes. See if you can keep that roundedness out of the back. Keep the length, that integrity through your spine. As you rock your body forward, take an exhale, hinge at the hips, let the upper body round down to that forward fold. Keep in mind here, the legs do not have to be straight here as well. You can add as much of a bend in the knees to help draw the ground closer to you. It is called a yoga practice, not a yoga perfect. So we always give ourselves the space and the freedom that we need in our movement. As you take your next exhale, allow a bit of a deeper bend through your knees, keeping the upper body rounded. Now we're gonna stack the spine here. Rock the weight back into your heels, keep the upper body heavy, and you're gonna push down through your heels, start to lengthen your legs. As your legs start to lengthen, add a little engagement through your glutes, hug your navel back in towards your spine. Think of one vertebrae stacking on top of one another, bringing yourself up, shoulders, gaze, soften the shoulders. So as you bring yourself to a standing posture, this is when we shift normally to a high mountain pose, letting those hands reach out, around, and up. And then as we exhale, taking a forward fold. Halfway lift. Exhale, forward fold, deep bend through the knees. Inhale, begin to stack the spine. Hands begin to lift into that high mountain pose. Go ahead and relax the hands for a moment. Oftentimes what I see in movement, especially when we're taking our forward fold, is people rounding their upper body as they take this down. If we allow our thoracic spine, that upper portion of our body, to round before taking this down, we're gonna create a lot of unnecessary pressure through the backside of our body. So keeping everything nice and segmented. As you take an exhale breath, little bend through your knees, draw the hips back, let your chest melt down to that halfway lift. As you feel into that halfway lift, let your body rock forward and then forward fold. This is gonna alleviate a lot of that unnecessary pressure through your lower back. Inhale and exhale. Let's see it all together. As we inhale, stack the spine into that mountain pose. Exhale, forward fold. Halfway lift. Plant the hand, step it back, come into a high plank. Now we move through what we call our chaturanga, which is that lowering down into our push-up, into an upward facing position, and then a downward facing position. If you're noticing that when you're in a high plank, that things are feeling unnecessary in as far as pressure through the lower back or through the shoulders, I want you to drop this down to your knees. You can still find that every bit of engagement and effort is the same whether you're kneeling or you're lifted. Notice that when we lower these down, we are keeping everything in line with each other. So rather than our elbows bending out to the side at an angle or letting our hips dive down, we're keeping everything locked in place by pushing the ground away from us, hugging the navel back and towards the spine, bending the elbows, but keeping those elbows stacked over the wrists. Bring it back up. So you can add a little bit of that rock forward engagement through your glutes. Lower things down, then shifting to that upward facing posture. So always listening to your body. You can do so kneeling, you can do so lifted. As you feel into that upward facing dog, draw the shoulders back, little engagement through the glutes, push down through your hands, openness through your chest and collarbone. Upward facing dog can also be modified into a cobra pose by lowering this down and keeping that lift just through your mid-back. No pressure down through the hands. Glute engagement is still there, but we're just lifting through the chest. So if you deal with any sciatic, nerve pressure, lower back injuries, fused discs, this is a really great and safe way to keep moving without overdoing it. And then sending it back to downward dog. You can transition from tabletop to then downward dog, or from that upward dog position, rolling over your toes, lifting your hips, planting the toes down. Now, common transitions when you're moving into a sequence is a three-legged dog. So right leg lifting or left leg, depending on which side you're transitioning through. But as you find that lift, transitioning into a runner's lunge. Oftentimes, you'll want to lift through the toes, lifting into that heel. So you have a high toe lift as that leg is reaching and extending. It gives you much more clearance to hug the knee in towards the chest and transition your foot in between your hands. If we keep the heel low, making that transition, we don't get as much space to travel. And once you find yourself planted, know that you can always adjust the distance between your back foot and your front foot. So if this feels like a lot, you can always shorten the stance. Just decide what feels best. Go ahead and lower this down for just a moment. Take a few rolls through the shoulders. We've been moving a little bit slower, so you might feel a lot more of that pressure building through your body. When we start to find transitions in our movement, we use the inhale breath to support our rising and lifting postures. Exhale breath for control and compression. So oftentimes lowering down in any of those positions or postures that we move through. So lastly, we're gonna tie all of those pieces and components together, working through what we call our sun salutation. This is typically what yoga practitioners will bring into practice to help get the body flowing and moving, giving you that deeper sense of breath, giving you that overall connection and awareness to how your body is feeling in any given day or moment. So we're gonna tie it all together. When you're ready, let's go ahead and bring ourselves down to that tabletop position. Feeling into our breath. Let's take a few rounds of cat-cows. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. Inhale, drop the belly, lift the gaze. Take an exhale, downward dog. With an inhale, lift high into your toes, lift the hips. Exhale, deep bend through your knees, gaze past your fingers. Inhale, step or hop to the top of your mat. Halfway lift, nice flat back. Exhale, forward fold. Mountain pose, stacking the spine, bringing the hands nice and lifted. And exhale, forward fold. Halfway lift. Plant the hands, step it back. Move through your chaturanga. So you use that exhale, lower down. Inhale, upway, lift. And then exhale, downward dog. For the sake of balance in our bodies, let's move through the left side. Take an inhale, left leg lifts. And exhale, plant your left foot. So just pausing here in that runner's lunge just so you can feel into that difference of your left side versus your right. You can add a little bounce, little lift of the hip, left knee staying stacked over left ankle, planting the hand down, stepping it back, and then moving through that chaturanga. Now notice as you're moving through that three-legged dog, your hip might have that tendency to want to hike higher than the other. See if you can keep the hips squared so the left hip and the right hip are leveled. You can focus on the top side of your foot, turning that top side of your foot in towards your heel. It will just help naturally level out through the hips. Feel that high heel lift. Good, let's try the other side. Left leg lifts, turning the top side of the foot in, leveling through those hips, lifting the heel a little higher, and exhale to bring it down. Soften down to your knees once more. So just as we found that movement, we found modifications in our chaturangas, same modification principles can be applied in your upward reaches. So if that high mountain pose, rather than stacking the spine, especially if you have any injuries through the lower back, you can work through a reverse swan dive. So meet me at the top of your mat, plant down through the feet, halfway lift through the spine. So feeling into that halfway lift, that length. I'm gonna turn towards you so you can see a little bit more of what I mean by the positioning of your feet. Feet are hip distance apart. As you're rooting down through your feet, add a little bend through your knees. You'll get more of that stretch through your glutes and through your hamstrings. Now, as you feel into that nice control through your spine, let your arms come out to a T. Draw the shoulders down. Still, it's like you're actively pushing those hands into your shins, but without doing that. Now, as you're grounded down through your feet, keep everything placed where it's at. Add a little separation through your legs, like you're trying to split the ground in two. This is gonna give you that deeper firing through your glutes, through your hips, more support through that lower back. Now, as you take that next inhale breath, we reverse that swan dive, which means we just draw the hips forward, strong back, strong core. Breathe it in. And exhale, relax. How that looks from the side. Taking it back down. We inhale, arms to a T, little separation through the legs. Then find our next inhale, hinge and draw it up. Take it down. So in either movement, you can either stack the spine or reverse your swan dive to bring your hands up to that high mountain pose. So let's move through it one more time, tying it all together with an inhale, high mountain pose, and exhale, forward fold. Halfway lift. Plant the hand, step it back, move through your chaturanga. Inhale, lift nice and high into your toes. Exhale, deep bend through your knees. Inhale, step or hop to the top, halfway lift, and forward fold. Inhale to that high mountain pose, whichever your preference is, and forward fold. Halfway lift. Plant the hand, step it back, move through your chaturanga. Inhale, rise into the toes. Exhale, deep bend through your knees. Step or hop to the top. Halfway lift. Forward fold. Stack the spine to your high mountain pose. And bring it down to heart center. That's it. You're an expert. Feel free to move through those salutations a few more rounds. Move through those cat-cows. Pay attention to how your breath supports your movement. The stacking of your hips, the softness through your neck, but above all, trust yourself, trust the process. Again, it's called a yoga practice, not a yoga perfect. Take your time, you've got this. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.